All right. Hello, and welcome to today's lesson about removing the stress from English interview prep. It's great to have you here. We're going to give it a few minutes to let people join. It takes a little time because we are live, but we have a lot of, I think, very interesting stuff to talk about today. This is Lesson 2 of our 5-part job interview English series with Pearson. Again, my name is Luke, and along with Pearson English, we're going to be teaching you how to handle a job interview. But that's not just the handling part, but also the English that you need to really do it well, to really find your confidence, to be yourself in English. Today we're going to be talking about confidence, a success-focused mindset. We're going to be talking about English phrases specifically. We're going to talk about how to deal with stress. We're going to be talking about your introduction, which is a very, very key part. And so we have a lot of things to go over. But as I said, we're going to spend a few minutes just waiting for people to join. And I hope you're having a fantastic day. I hope you're having a good week. It's Thursday, and so the week is coming to an end. So I hope you have some interesting weekend plans as well. We're going to be over here going through some slides like this. So you'll see me here, hello, and you'll see the slides beside me. Hello, Arnold, watching from South Africa. So as people join, as I mentioned, we're going to be getting started in just a minute. We're waiting for a few people to join because we're here live. So as people join, say hi. Say where you're watching from, right? Say any issues you have around the job interview process or your thoughts. I'm going to have challenges for you throughout. Of course, we're going to be doing, I believe it's 3 challenges today. So look forward to that. Be ready to put in your answers to the challenges in the chat as quickly as you can, okay? So just be there ready to go. Now, I'm also going to be showing you stuff here on screen, right? So, if we're talking about, I'll just skip ahead for a second, a little teaser, right? If we're talking about this, for example, I don't know, you might take a screenshot, you might share it, and as I said, we've got 3 more of these lessons coming up. In the next lesson, we're going to be getting into the answers to the questions, right? The 2 most common interview questions, advanced questions in the one after that. Then we're going to be talking about how to pitch yourself, communication more broadly. And I think it's going to be very interesting. So again, welcome. I see we have a lot of people joining from Greece, from the UK, Clary and Razia, and Renato and Guillerme, if I'm saying that correctly. Welcome, it's great to have you. Awesome. Again, my name is Luke, and we are doing this lesson, how to remove stress from English interview prep with Pearson English. And we're going to be getting started in just a minute. Pleased to see you're working with us. Watching from the UK, you're a brilliant tutor. Thank you, Claire Bowers. Madrid, Spain, Luciana. And Katie says, hi, Luke. Hello, Katie. All right. Well, I think we can kick it off. I think we can get started. And as I said, I'll do a bit of an intro, and then be ready to give some of your answers, but keep putting in the chat where you're watching from. Okay? All right. And oh, by the way, we will be doing a Q&A at the end. Okay? So we're going to have a dedicated chunk of time at the end where we're going to be going over your questions. So start thinking about those questions you have about the English of the interview process, right? Specific phrases and words, and any questions more broadly about doing a job interview. Okay, so today's objectives. We're going to be talking about how to find your confidence in the process, how to have a success-focused mindset. A lot of people have failed the interview before it even starts, and it's really about how you think, and it really matters. It makes a big difference. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about making the most of research and how you can then avoid feeling stress. How do you actually research to prepare for an interview? We'll talk about a lot of useful English vocabulary and phrases throughout today's lesson. And you're also going to learn an interesting way to prepare for questions. Now, we all have our own ways of doing things, but I'm going to share a really interesting best practice as a way to prepare for a question, okay? And of course, we're going to be talking about the self-introduction. The self-introduction is a really important part of the beginning of an interview. But is it a, hello, my name is Luke, my favorite sport is tennis? Probably not. So we're going to talk about that throughout, okay? Hello from Holland. Hello. Welcome. And Mexico, Edgar. Welcome. Carla. Victoria. Good afternoon from Greece. Wow, so great to see so many people here, okay? So I just want to give you this sort of thought. You are the only person who is you, right? The only person at the Venn diagram of all the unique personality traits, characteristics, skills, and experience, the only person who has all of them that you have is you. It's easy to think, oh, there are 60 other candidates. What do I do? I'm never going to make it. No, you have a superpower, and that is the fact that you're the only one who has exactly what you have, right? It's also important when you're going into an interview to think about authenticity, right? Being honest. That may mean thinking of a question or an answer to a question not as what did they want to hear, but what do I want to say? What do I really want to communicate? That then allows you to be confident when you're speaking and be kind of real. And people respond really well to that authenticity, to someone who's not just trying to answer what they think another person wants to hear, but their real answer. That can be a breath of fresh air to an interviewer, right? I also want to mention that, if your English is not perfect, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying to take your career to the next level. Don't let that be the thing that stops you from trying, right? And if you get an interview, you wouldn't be there if English were the main issue, right? So if your English is not perfect, yeah, keep working on it, right? It's okay. It's okay. Always try to improve. But, right, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not communicate perfectly. And of course, being very well prepared is going to help boost your confidence. It's going to help you feel really good about the process. If you're well prepared, you're going to go into the interview feeling really, really good. Okay? All right. Now, I got my slides are backwards there. Oops. That's okay. Sophie from the UK, hello. And Peru, Elizabeth, hello. Good to have you. Hey, Mondelez here. Ooh, that's exciting. Great. Guys, we're going to be doing challenges throughout. Again, my name is Luke. I'm just saying this because more people are joining, so it's great to have you. Today we're talking about getting ready for an interview. Okay, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at the chat. From Nepal, Yadav, great to have you as well. And you can put your questions in throughout, but we will have a Q&A section at the end. Okay, now I want to give you a little bit of a way to talk about the English feeling you have, right? When you're confident. In English, how do you express that? How do you express that you feel really good about an interview that is coming up, right? So just a few specific English phrases that you might use. Now, they're not all exactly the same, so we'll talk about each one briefly, but your friend might ask you, hey, how do you feel about your interview tomorrow? And you might feel really good, so you say, I've got this in the bag. Now, that means you think you have secured the job before the interview itself. That's a way to say I'm really confident, right? The other candidates, they don't have a chance, right? You might say, I've done my homework. Now, that doesn't mean I think I will definitely get it. That may mean, well, I'm really well prepared. I've done a lot of research. I think I'm ready. But it doesn't necessarily say, yeah, I've got it in the bag. It's maybe less certain than I've got this in the bag, okay? I feel like I'm ready for anything. This may mean not so much that you prepared for every question, maybe yes, maybe no, but no matter what happens in the interview, you just feel generally very ready. So this is a good way to talk about confidence as well. Then, of course, I couldn't be more ready. I couldn't be more something. That's a great way to talk about feeling prepared, right? Now, what about a piece of cake? I'm sure you've heard this expression before. It's going to be a piece of cake. This one could come across as overconfident. If you say something is going to be a piece of cake, maybe you're going in with this extreme confidence and then you find out, ooh, it's a lot harder than I thought. So just be careful with that one. A piece of cake could be a good thing, but should an interview be a piece of cake? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's good if it's a little challenging, right? Okay, so I want to just ask you right at the start here, before we get into preparing for questions and research, I want to hear from you. What do you think about having an interview? If you were to have an interview next week, just imagine that. How would you feel about it? How does the idea of doing an English interview make you feel? Put that in the chat right now. I would like to see your answers. I want to see what you think. Harish Sharma, hello. Hello from Brazil. Juliana, fantastic. It looks like so we have some comments coming in from different places. It looks like Monley and Pearson are complimenting each other. That's nice. Nice to see. Monley says, oh, stop it, you. Okay. Poland, hello. Beta, great. Always nervous about interviews. So Sophie says, I'm always nervous. I think it's okay to be nervous, right? Thinking you've got it in the bag is one thing. It's going to be a piece of cake. Maybe means you don't have any nervousness, and maybe that's a good thing. But could it be that you're just a really confident person and that makes you not put in the hard work to prepare? Well, I don't know. I feel confident until the interview starts. Then I start shaking. Yeah, shaking is an interesting one. This may be a separate tip, but I've found, this is just a personal little tip from me, whenever I'm in a high-pressure situation, could be an interview, could be anything, a live stream, for example, just for 10 seconds, just close your eyes before it starts. Not when the interviewer is in front of you, right? Maybe before you go in. And just breathe very slowly and say, everything's fine. This isn't the end of the world if it doesn't go perfectly. It's going to be okay. And then just a couple deep breaths, that can make a big difference. That's my personal tip. All right, so let's keep moving. I think there's always the fear of being judged more by a possible mistake in English than the answer itself. And Clara, that's a great point. That goes back to what I was saying about your English doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you probably wouldn't be there if it had to be perfect, right? So keep working on your English, but if it's not perfect, that is okay. That is okay, right? We live in a very international world, and so nobody's English is absolutely perfect all the time, right? Hello from Sri Lanka. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit about how to prepare for the interview itself. And I'm going to give you a few tips specifically, and then I'm going to give you a method that you can use to answer questions. This is a very common method. You may have heard of it, so we'll spend a bit of time talking about that too. All right? Keep putting your answers to how an interview makes you feel in the chat. So this kind of goes without saying, but you want to really know the role, the responsibilities, the requirements, the company, the culture, even the interviewers. You want to know all of these things going in. What kind of stuff will you be doing? What kind of company is this? What is their culture? What is this interviewer? Check them out on LinkedIn. Learn a little bit about their background. The more you know, as they say, and the more you know, the more you'll be able to speak with confidence, intelligently about this role. And they will be able to feel that you are very well prepared, right? And oh, wow, you know so much about this company. And you seem like you already know everything about the role. Most of the other candidates I've talked to, they're just at one more interview, right? So it seems like you really have focused in on this position. That can make you stand out, right? You also want to learn any specific requirements about how to answer questions. Different companies may have different requirements. For example, some companies want you to use the STAR method, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. The STAR method is a way to structure answers to questions. And so you want to make sure you know what expectations there are, right? You also want to think about what different types of questions you may be asked. And just write those down before you start preparing for the interview. You might be asked about past experience. You might be asked about personal traits. You might be asked hypothetical questions, hypothetical situations. What would you do if something happened? To learn more about your character, right? Some interviews that are a little more, let's say, involved have whiteboarding exercises where you have to do deep exercises with the team to solve problems. So know what types of questions you may get, and then make a list of questions. Maybe 5 for each type. Maybe totally 20 to 25 questions. Now, that doesn't mean that, those will cover all of them that you may be asked, but at least you're pretty well prepared to answer 20 to 25 questions, and that's a good starting point. Don't, though, as we talked about before, you don't want to write full answers to those and then memorize the answers. That's generally not a good idea. Renato says, how do I answer about my last jobs? We could do that. That sounds like a great Q&A question, Renato. I'm very nervous. It's hard to be yourself in another language. Absolutely. Being yourself in another language takes practice, and that's why you want to be aware of the questions you may be asked and do some practice to try to answer those in English, of course. That's going to give you a little bit more comfort with being yourself in English, right? It just takes preparation and practice, right? So keep working on your English. It doesn't have to be perfect, as I said. Make a game plan. So if they ask me this type of question, how will I answer that? You don't need to write down every word, but what am I going to say generally? And if you can connect with a native speaker, a friend, a colleague, someone who can work with you, you can say, hey, I made this list of 25 questions. Do you think you could ask these to me? We could spend about an hour. I would really appreciate it. I've got a job coming up or a job interview coming up. Would you mind? Probably a great chance to, interact with a friend, right? People like to help each other, and then they can give you some feedback, right? And you also want to be using outlines. This is not writing down every word. An outline is the structure. Basically, I'll generally talk about if they ask me this hypothetical question about what I would do if something went wrong in this hypothetical situation. First, I'll talk about this kind of thing, and then this kind of thing, and then this kind of thing. Make a little outline for yourself. That way you're mentally prepared, right? Mentally prepared. And if you're mentally prepared, then you're going to feel really relaxed when they ask that question instead of very nervous, right? Bandar from Saudi Arabia. Hello. Now let's talk specifically about the STAR method. And then I have another challenge for you coming up, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about some English phrases you can use too. But just one thing about the STAR method. STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. So that's actually a great way to make an outline. So first, so someone asks you about your previous work experience. Tell me about a time, this is a common question, tell me about a time when you had to handle something that you didn't know much about, right? You were in a new situation and you had to deal with something and you didn't have much experience in that area. Okay, situation. So explain what it was. Don't spend too much time on the S part. You just want to give a basic overview. Okay, this is what was happening. Then the task. What did you have to really accomplish, right? What was the thing? Again, you don't want to spend too much time on that. You want to spend probably more time on A and R. So what did you do to figure out how to handle this situation? You didn't have the skills to handle it necessarily, but what did you do? How did you overcome this difficulty? Specifically, working with other people, asking questions, doing research. Maybe you went to another department and you brought someone else in to help, which shows that you can collaborate well. Focusing on what you did shows your good characteristics, shows what you're capable of, shows how you handle problems. This is showing rather than telling. And then the result, essentially, what was the outcome? Hopefully it's a good outcome. So choose examples usually that have a good outcome for this one, I think. You want to just say, okay, and because we were able to figure it out, the project that we were working on, and then just say the good result, right? So the STAR method, you can research more about it, but this is a really good way to both outline your possible answers to the questions you prepare for, and a great way to structure an answer because it helps you focus on what's really important, especially that A part, the action part, okay? Monica from Poland, hello and welcome. Good to have you. Okay, I see we have more people joining. That's fantastic. We're going to get into specifically in the interview. This could be, right, an English issue, or it could be that you're not sure about the idea that's being said. But one thing that can come up in an interview, specifically if English is not your first language, is you are asked something and you didn't hear it completely, or you need a little bit more detail to really understand it. You don't want to be answering the wrong question. So it's better to ask for clarification, to ask someone to repeat something, instead of answering the wrong question. If you don't know what they said or you don't completely understand, now you have a great opportunity to show that you're not afraid to say you didn't understand. That shows that, hey, I'm just willing to, get to the answer. Even if I look silly for a second, I'm willing to ask a question. That could be a good thing, right? So what do you say, right? What do you say in this kind of situation when you don't understand something? And again, we don't want to say what. Probably not a good way to express not understanding. Huh? What? It just doesn't sound very polite, right? Sorry, what? It's something you might say with a close friend. So don't do that, probably. I'm not quite sure I understand. Could you clarify that? This is a really good one that you can use when you need someone to give you a bit more, or when you didn't understand. I didn't quite catch that. Would you mind repeating that? Maybe you didn't hear a very important key word, right? And it could be an English issue or just a word you're not sure about. Okay, I didn't quite catch that. Quite. Notice I'm using the word quite a lot. This is a softening word. This allows you to ask for repetition politely, right? I didn't quite get that, okay? I want to be sure I understand. Does that mean, here's where you can check your comprehension. So if you're pretty sure you understood, you just want to make sure, I'm not quite sure I understand, does that mean? Or to clarify, are you saying, then you repeat what you think you understand, and they say, no, that I meant, or, yes, that's right, exactly, you got it. So then you're showing that you're paying attention, you're listening, and it's a good way to engage as well, okay? A few more. We're going to go over a couple more. And if you want, you can, take screenshots of these. These are really useful English phrases that you can use not just in interviews, but in all kinds of situations, okay? How about, could you give me an example of that? I understood what you said, but I don't know what that is. This is a situation where you heard the words, but there's some concept, some idea that you didn't catch, or you don't know. Simply, you don't know that thing, right? So then you should use the STAR method. STAR method? Could you give me an example of that? So that's just a way to get further explanation. Could you break that down for me? Would be the same thing. Break something down means you have something that might be complicated, and then you want it to be simplified. Give me an example would be, don't know this idea. Can you tell me something in the real world that could help me understand? You could simply say, could you help me understand that? I use this one all the time. If someone's being confusing in general, I say, I smile. Could you help me understand that? I find smiling really helps because then people want to explain things further. Could you break that down for me? And this could you is more polite than, why? I don't know that. So you don't want to just directly say, I don't know what that is. What is that? I don't know. Instead, ask a question, right? Could you give me a bit more context? This would be explaining the things around it so that it makes sense, right? You have said something very specific, and it could mean 5 different things. So if you give me a bit more context, then I will understand which of those 5 different things it really means. Could you give me a bit more context? Very, very powerful, I think, questions, all of these. Now, you can use can questions. I think could is a bit more polite, right? Can questions are okay. Can you clarify what you mean by that? Can you clarify that? Can you elaborate on that? Give me a bit more, basically give me a bit more detail, okay? So those are just a few that you can use. And if you do understand, by the way, then you can just start answering the question. You totally understand. You don't need any more details. But I would recommend that you don't just start right away. Make a little comment to show I get your question, right? Oh, that's an interesting question. Sure, I'd love to talk about that. I appreciate that question. Great question. Then you start answering. This shows I'm listening to you when you're speaking. I understand what you just said. It's clear to me. I like the question. Now I'm going to talk about it. If you just launch into your answer right away, it's not quite as interactive, right? So I would recommend something like this. Okay. I see we have some more people joining. LinkedIn user, that's an interesting name, from the Netherlands. Ferouz from Uzbekistan. Let's see. Okay, Victor, welcome and hello. So what I'd like you to do is share an example of a time in the past when you had a misunderstanding, okay? Maybe it's because you didn't understand what was said, or it was something that was too complicated, and you needed to ask another person to repeat, to explain something further. When have you had a misunderstanding? I'll give you a simple example. I had a conversation with, I was having a conversation with someone about a game, and they said that game, or no, it was an anime. The anime, they do a really good job at dabbing. I thought, dabbing? And I kept hearing dabbing, and so I said, sorry, could you explain what you mean by that? Because I thought when I hear dab, it's that thing that people used to do, right? Like that. I don't know if that's still a thing anymore, but it's that thing that people used to do, the dab, right? That move. But he was saying dubbing, and it was a pronunciation thing. Oh, dubbing, when the voice is over something. So just by asking, could you explain what you mean by that? We were able to figure out, okay, I got it now. I know what you're saying. So think of an example. I want you to think of an example and tell me how you finally resolved the meaning, how you were finally able to either understand or get clarity about that. Let me know. Put those in the chat if you can think of an example. Okay. I don't know if I said hello to Carlos from Spain, but hello. And to those joining, I see we have more and more people joining, which is fantastic. Again, my name is Luke, and this is our lesson today about preparing for a job interview in English with Pearson English. This is our 5-lesson series about job interview English. In the next lesson, we're going to be getting into how do you answer the most common questions. For example, strengths and weaknesses. So we're going to be getting into the meat of the interview itself. And so I hope you can join next week as well. It will be at exactly the same time. We will do a Q&A section at the end pretty soon. So make sure if you have questions, make sure you're writing those down so that you can just immediately pop those into the chat right away when we get to the Q&A section, okay? All right, Uruguay. Wow, nice. Ahmed from Sudan, and I'm going to take a quick sip. For the sake of my voice, I need to hydrate. Okay. And Abby says those phrases are great to keep the conversation flowing too. I think that's a really interesting point, Abby. One thing about an interview is that it's easy to think of it as this: you ask me the questions, I'll give you my answers, then we're done, right? And that's not what it is. It's a conversation. That's what it is. So if you think of an interview as a conversation, you're connecting with another human being. They're a person. They like to laugh. They want to make connections. They want to like you, right? They want to understand what you can do. It happens to be that they might be a decision maker, yes, but it still is just a conversation, okay? So now let's get into our self-introduction. Keep putting your answers to the previous question in the chat. Let's get into the self-introduction, right? What are we doing with a self-introduction? Well, we are making, hopefully, a very good first impression. We want the interviewer or interviewers to say, wow, okay, this person is well put together, smart, intelligent, interesting, great communicator. So when you're doing this, you don't want to think of yourself as, I'm just delivering my self-introduction to get it over with. No, you're a storyteller. You're telling the story of your experience, your qualifications, you as a person. Right? You're pitching yourself. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. You're pitching yourself. So if you do do's and don'ts, and we're going to start with the don'ts because the do's are more positive. So we'll get the don'ts over with first, okay? So, excuse me. So, you don't want to use a generic self-introduction that's going to be the same for every single interview. You want to have a unique one. And you don't have to memorize it. You can have an outline again, but you don't have to memorize every word. I would recommend not doing that. Make it dynamic. Make it different for each one. Follow an outline in your head rather than memorizing it as a speech, because that can feel like you don't have that connection, right? If I had memorized every piece of this lesson today and I were just reading from a script, I don't think we would have, hopefully there's a bit more of a connection when I'm just talking, right? And I have the things I want to talk about, but it's just not, it's harder to connect, right? You also don't want to just be saying, and then in 1998, I did this, and then when I was there, I did this and this and this. That's just reciting your CV. Probably not the best idea. It's also it's a self-introduction for a job, not for, the first day of a group or something. So I really love tennis. If you wanted to add that somewhere in the end, maybe okay. I would recommend that you want to focus on stuff that's relevant to this position, right? And not focus too much on personal interests and things like that. Mention it, add flavor, but don't focus on it too much. So the do's then, okay? What about the things that you should do? Well, you want to say why your experience and skills make you really good as a possible candidate for this position, right? Sounds obvious, right? But that's very important. And you want to also show rather than tell. talk about how you handle problems, how you work with others, how you learn things. And if you can do that by sharing your experience, what you've done as part of a story, rather than just saying, I like to work with others, I'm good at communicating, then it's going to click for the people listening to you. They're going to remember you because you show rather than just tell. Saying I'm a good communicator is not as impactful as showing that you're a good communicator, right? And also, you're a person. So what excites you? What are you passionate about? How can you connect your passion and your interest to this role to show that, hey, this is not just an interview for me. I want to actually work here. And also, with the STAR method, we talked about results, right? So what was learned? What did you get from that experience? What was the outcome? Talk about results too, right? And that's a good way to say what's impressive in your experience, what is really impressive as part of your self-introduction, okay? And we're going to look at some English phrases in just a moment for how you can actually handle that. Aman, Rana, welcome. Razia, hello. I do not have a problem with English, but with the British accent. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Hi, Berin. I would say my British accent is oh, you mean understanding of the British accent. Okay. I'm not so good at doing a British accent. I've tried many times. Thanks a lot. So interesting. Your lesson is for me. Great, says Kalima. Hello. Ferouz says, you should approach the interview in the best possible mood, and the rest just flows. And yes, maybe self-confidence also matters. I agree with that. If you feel like, I'm not going to get it, then you probably won't. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that's a great point, Ferouz. That's a great point. I used one of these examples to buy more time to build an answer. Okay, great. I'm just reading through some of the comments here. Keep the comments coming and get your questions ready for the Q&A section. Okay. So now, this might be what you've all been waiting for. What specific things can you say in English when you're doing your self-introduction? How can you piece it together? So I want to share with you some very useful English phrases, some English sentence chunks that you can use when you're making this. And I want you to get yours ready. I don't want you to give me a whole self-introduction, but I'd like you to put, let's say, 2 or 3 sentences together using some of these phrases. So I'm just telling you this in advance. Get those ready. Put 2 to 3 sentences together with these phrases, and I'm going to take a look at them. So start working on it right away. Don't wait for me to ask, okay? All right, so let's take a look. So you might say, when you're talking about experience, I have a background in. Okay, that's just a very simple way to talk about generally the focus of your career. You want to make it a little more extensive background. Okay, maybe you're telling your story and you want to talk about where you began. When I first started out, your first job in this field, right? Again, these are storytelling phrases, especially when I first started in. So when I first started in this, I had very little experience. It was really difficult, but then I had some colleagues who wanted to teach me, and that helped me learn faster. That sort of storytelling approach is a lot better than saying, I had no experience when I began, and then I learned, and then I knew everything I needed. It's less interesting, right? Maybe you can talk about the reasons. I first got into this field when I saw a job listing on, and you can give a bit of context. Yeah, that's not showing your specific skills, but that's the storytelling part, right? One of the biggest challenges I faced. So as part of my introduction, I want to give a very quick story to show rather than tell. One of the biggest challenges I faced in my position I had in 2015 was then you tell a little story. Maybe you use the STAR method, that you use situation, task, action, result, and tell a little story to show then what you learned, what you got good at, how you manage people. That's what the interviewer wants to hear, right? That position pushed me to become a better leader, a better communicator, a better facilitator. So this thing made me do this, making connections between the thing that you did in the past and the skills that you got, right? Throughout my career, I have always emphasized asking questions when I don't know something. I'm not afraid to look stupid, right? I think it was Confucius who said, "The man who asks a question is a fool for a day, and the man who never asks a question is a fool for a lifetime." Something like that, right? So you could bring that in, right? Throughout my career, I have always. That shows your values. I have a knack for. This is a natural ability, right? A knack for something is a thing that you're good at kind of naturally that you develop over time, which helps you do your job well. Explaining things, using humor, whatever it may be, right? This is a great one. My previous colleagues would say I am. Oh, so here, your previous colleagues, this is a bit of what we could call social proof. Social proof is kind of like, you buy stuff online, you read the reviews. It's like reading your reviews a little bit. You're able to say, not just what I think. If you were to go to my previous colleagues and ask them, they would say that I am very well organized, that I am very precise in everything that I do, whatever it is, right? Or I tend to excel when I am maybe in stressful situations to show that you're really good at handling those, right? You might say in the same way, I'm at my best when I'm working with a group of 3 to 4 highly engaged people and we're focusing on one task, right? And then you could focus on the job itself, right? Whatever this thing is I think my desire to always be learning makes me an ideal fit for this role. These are, I think, very powerful phrases. Now, if you want to focus specifically on the company and why you wanted to join this interview, you could say, one of the most appealing things about this role is very simple, right? The thing that really drew me to name the company was, so what caught your attention? What caught your interest? These are just some simple phrases that you can use to focus on your experience and maybe why you wanted to join, okay? So maybe the company really focuses on learning, right? The focus on everyone learning as much as possible and asking questions here really appeals to me. That's one thing I really value about this company. That also shows your research, right? It shows that you're very well prepared. You know the culture of the company, okay? It's very useful stuff. As I said, I'm going to be asking you, so I want to see some of the things that you would say. Use some of these phrases that we talked about, right? One of these, but especially these. Can you use one or two of these to give a very short beginning to a self-introduction or part of your self-introduction? I want to just see if you can use some of these, right, to start to apply what you learn. Because if you just learn stuff, it's easy to forget. But if you actually make something with what you learn, if you have some output, it's going to stick in your head, okay? Abby says, I first got into the field when studying at university, where I was first introduced to marketing and the exciting opportunities. Ah, very nice. Alina says, I am absolutely agreed with you, Luke. What we should sound, that we should sound factual and personalized within the interview stage. I agree with that completely. Lillian and Razia, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So keep your answers coming. I would like to hear part of a self-introduction that you would give. Make a couple of sentences, put those in the chat, okay? Pop those in the chat, and I would like to take a look. All right, now we're going to be getting into our Q&A here, so I hope you have some good questions ready to go. Just a few things. So we've talked about today how you can research and prepare for an interview. We're going to be getting into the specific questions in the next lesson. We talked about things like the STAR method, how you can get ready for a specific question, right? To make an outline that's going to help you make it like a story. Excuse me. We talked about a few useful phrases for confidence, right? We talked about things like, it's a piece of cake, I've got it in the bag, right? We talked about some expressions that you can use when you don't understand or you need clarification. We then talked about the self-introduction, how you can build that, and some useful English phrases for your self-introduction. Some do's and don'ts as well. So, I think if you can build confidence and get over this feeling of stress and know that you are able to handle this interview, and if you're well prepared, you can go in feeling pretty relaxed that you've got it in the bag. That's really half of the battle, right? Having that confidence and getting over the stress part, and then if you have that, it's going to increase your chances of success. Because confident people tend to be more relaxed and to speak more clearly and to do better than people who are shaking it and extremely nervous and can't get their words out, right? So if you can find a way, if you can follow some of the ideas we talked about in this lesson and find a way, I think you're going to see the difference, right? Prepare. If you're ready, if you have your outlines, you've practiced 25 questions, you're ready for anything, you've done your research, again, confidence, big confidence boost, right? The interview is going to be, it really will be a piece of cake, okay? And don't write answers probably, because that can get you into some trouble, right? If you write out scripts, but if you practice, maybe with a native English-speaking friend or colleague, if you practice a bunch of times, right, and you have the sort of model or framework in your mind for answering questions, then again, you're gonna be able to express exactly what you want more clearly, and that's going to connect with the interviewer, and you're going to stand out, right? You're going to stand out among the crowd, right? And of course, as I mentioned, if your English is not perfect, it's okay. But that does not mean you cannot be yourself in English. You absolutely can. Perfect English should not be your roadblock, right? You should always be working on your English, always be improving, but don't wait for perfection, right, to start doing stuff, making friends, getting a better job, whatever it is, right? Don't wait until I have perfect English and then I can start doing things. No, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, as we say, right? Okay, so let's get into the Q&A, shall we? If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, about any of the idioms or expressions, and also I asked you to put together a couple of sentences. I would like to check that out too. If you have any other questions about the interview process, about how to handle specific things, whatever it may be, now is the time to ask. Okay? And thank you all so much for being here. It's really great. It's really great that we have more and more people joining from around the world. I think that's fantastic. And of course, next week I think is going to be even more interesting. Okay, Maria from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Hello. Okay. Sophie says, throughout my career, I have developed lots of skills and experience that make me right for this role, such as excellent communication and being a good team player. Now then, what I would say there, Sophie, would be, okay, so that's the statement. That's the thing that you have. You're a good team player and excellent communication. Now, how can you show that? Is there anything that you can mention that's going to make that a little more tangible for the interviewer to see it rather than just hear it? Having both is good. Okay, so I'm a good team player. In my, as you see in my resume, I worked with a small team in 2018 and we worked on a project where we had to give a few basic details and then focus on this key thing that shows, right, what these 3 or 4 people had to do in order to achieve something. That then shows that you're a good team player. So you have the statement, I'm a good team player, and then a little example that makes that statement kind of click. Because these things that we say, they flow by like a river, right? And it's so easy to forget. If you're talking and I hear 3 things, it's so easy to forget. But if you make a really nice example, that specific example that shows it, I will remember that. And now I will say to myself, oh yeah, Sophie really is a good team player because she did something almost impossible with 3 other people. And I remember the story she said about what she did in 2018, right? That's the kind of thing that you want to do to kind of lock in your good traits, right? But that's a good answer. How do you deal with feeling intimidated by the interviewer? This is a very good question from Diana. Okay, so first of all, what kind of an interviewer would be intimidating? No. So if someone is asking really tough questions and really grilling, you could say grilling you, you feel like you're being interrogated. I would first ask, how much of that is in your head as opposed to it being real, right? Sometimes people just have a very serious demeanor and they're like this. Okay, tell me more about that. Right? So they might be watching a cartoon in their mind. You don't know what's going on. So don't put too much importance on someone's serious eyebrows, right? Is that intimidation real or is it your perception? And if it's your perception, right, then what you should do is just as you would in any interview, focus on giving clear answers, show and tell, right? Use the STAR method, research, prepare so that you feel confident going in so that you can handle anything. Do what you would do anyway, right? And try not to dwell on your understanding of this person, right? They might talk in a certain way, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And if you do that, you're more likely to hear after the interview, oh, that was a really great conversation. Thanks for choosing to interview with us, right? You don't know what they're actually thinking. So just assume that that's just their way of speaking, right? And don't dwell on it. Don't focus on it too much. Okay? Yeah, because some people, they have this interview mode where they're super serious, and then after the interview, they go play Fortnite or something. I don't know. I sometimes, because I've interviewed a lot of people. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and I sometimes will be a little serious because I don't want to show any favoritism. I just want to be totally neutral, right? So sometimes I'll be kind of, we could say, a little serious. But as soon as the interview is over, I'm just, I'm going around doing whatever I do. So don't worry about it too much. It might just be in your head. And so that's my advice. Could you please share any tips on how to behave yourself within the stress of the interview when you're being asked some odd questions? Okay. So this is from Alana, and this is a great question. So how do you deal with the stress of the interview, especially when someone says something you didn't prepare for? Right? I said come up with 20 to 25 questions to prepare for. What if you get one that's completely over there, unrelated to any of your questions? This is, first of all, why it's important not to memorize answers, because you need to be flexible. You need to be ready for anything. But that's why I talked about having a method. I didn't just say write down 25 questions and then write outlines for only those 25 questions. I said make sure you have a method for answering questions. So that way, I use my 25 questions as general preparation for the types of questions I may get. But if something unexpected happens, I can handle it because I have a method. Now, I talked about the STAR method. I'm not telling you you have to use it, but I think it's good. If you ask me a question I didn't expect, what am I going to do? I'm going to say, oh, that's a good question. Or I'm going to say, could you give me a little more context? And then I'm going to think, what am I going to say? Okay. And then as they're explaining more context, I have a bit of time, right? Then I say, oh, okay, good question. So I'll just talk a little bit about something that happened last year, right? And then I can answer their question. Maybe it's an experience question, or if it's a hypothetical question. So if I were in a situation with a very difficult colleague who wasn't willing to work, I think I would. And then so you have time to think, but then you're following your basic method, your basic approach to answer the question for each type, right? So we have past experience questions, hypothetical questions. You need to have a way of answering each one, and that will prepare you for anything, okay? What is the best way to exit the interview and say goodbye? Thank you. That's a good question from Abby. I think, Abby, we could say, well, after, so if you've asked them, we're going to be talking at the in the fourth lesson about how, I think it's the fourth one, how you can ask questions to the interviewer. You would ask questions you have, you would communicate with them back and forth, right? And then a great phrase to use is, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time. And then, right, if maybe it's an interaction online, a video call, I hope to hear from you soon, something like that. But after that, you probably want to do a follow-up email to check in to see if they're still making a decision, or just to let them know you're still interested, right? But on the video call itself, thank you for your time. I appreciate your time, right? And maybe I look forward to hearing from you. Okay, that would be what I would recommend. Okay, I think we can take one more question very quickly. See, we have more and more people joining. Wow, that's fantastic. Let's see, have I missed any? Some interviewers ask questions. This is from Mohammed. Some interviewers ask questions about your locality and place of birth. Do these questions really make a difference in your selection? No, those should be just detailed questions unless they're requiring someone to work locally in an office and you're not there. If companies have different policies about remote work, so you need to know what their requirements are. If they say we're a remote company, doesn't matter where you live, maybe they're just asking you so that they know your time zone. But if it's a role where you have to be in the office 2 days a week, then they might be asking so that they know. But they should be asking that before the interview, right? They should figure out if you're local, if they require people to be local, they should figure that out before the interview itself, right? So they might just be asking about curiosity or for curiosity's sake. Anybody who wants to have conversations on WhatsApp. Okay, good luck with that. Okay, thanks for all the tips and fantastic engagement. I appreciate that. Jamie Bandar, an interview once asked me a hypothetical yes and no question and asked me to give 2 justifications if yes and 2 justifications if no. Caught me off guard because it was a bit politically correct. I nailed it though. Fantastic. Great to hear it. Okay. Well, friendly friends, thank you so much for joining today's lesson on preparing for an interview in English. Hopefully you found it to be useful. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate if you could, well, share it. Share it with friends, share it wherever you happen to be watching it, give it a like, right? And I hope you can join next week at the same time. We're going to be getting into the interview questions. We're going to be talking about sample answers. It's going to be, I think, really interesting. I'm really excited about next week's lesson. Thank you for all the great questions and comments. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you so much, Monli. Awesome to hear that. Great. So, again, join me and Pearson English next week I'll leave it to the post to say when it is. Same time, I'll say that, okay? And I think it's going to be very interesting, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a great rest of the day. If you didn't get your question answered, make sure you bring that for next week. We'll get into everything that we can, and thanks again. Have a good one. Bye-bye, everybody. See ya.